and welcome to The Ripple Impact, the podcast where we dive into those fascinating small moments, big decisions, and unexpected ripples that create waves of change in brands, in businesses, leadership, and in life. I'm Laura Barber, founder of The Ripple Impact. I'm a brand strategist who spent over 20 years inside global giants like PepsiCo and Coca-Cola. And now through the Ripple Impact business, I help leaders and founders turn human stories into brand growth. Each week, I sit down with bold thinkers, founders, and what we call wave maker guests to explore the ripple moments that have shaped their journey and the lessons you can take to transform your own business and your brand. As a person who is obsessed with human storytelling, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Quinn Stainfield-Bruce to the show today. He is the founder of Humanness, a practice dedicated to restoring soul, authenticity, and human connection to the world of business. With over 2 decades of experience working with global leaders like Unilever, P&G, and Samsung, and a deep study in Buddhist philosophy and Japanese art, Quinn bridges 2 worlds that rarely meet, commerce and consciousness. At Humanness, he's helping leaders rediscover what makes us irreplaceable in the age of AI: honesty, compassion, creativity, and purpose. Quinn, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Laura.
Lovely to see you. So I would love to start at the beginning. I would love to start with your journey. What has brought you to creating Humanness and the ripples that brought you here today?
Do you know what's quite cool about that question and quite cool about you and I talking is that you worked with the big multinational global brands, for them, within them, and I spent most of my life working on the agency side with them, and we both find ourselves today not necessarily doing that in the same way that we did before. And it's like we've been on this maybe 20-year journey where we have seen things change and unfold, and I think it will definitely add to a particular dynamic of today's conversation where we both have this sort of very interesting perspective. But to answer your question about the beginning, I launched a youth insight agency when I was 18 called The Youth Conspiracy. And we were very quickly working with big multinational brands. And it was great, and it was amazing, and it was fun. The thing is that what drove me to succeed and achieve very early on wasn't necessarily positive influences. When I was 13, my mother left and took my sisters, and I spent a lot of my life believing that I was unlovable and worthless. And I dealt with that in 2 ways. I dealt with it with high achieving. If I run my own agency at 18, I must be worthy. And then I also did a lot of drugs and drank a lot of alcohol. And those 2 entities were really profoundly unsustainable. But for the first, I would say, 16 years of my career, I was working within marketing, advertising, and then ultimately software, marketing tech, and software tech, and closing one of the biggest deals of my life, closing with a big commission check when I was about 34, which was nearly 7 years ago. The realization that the money wasn't going to make me happy really brought me to my knees. And I walked myself into rehab then and came out and left that job that I was doing. And that's when I went on this 7-year journey of transformation, of rediscovering myself, I suppose. This is where Humanness was born out of, right? It was born out of my own understanding of what is required to truly transform. And I mean from the depths of addiction and suicidal thoughts and that level of darkness to today living a life beyond my wildest dreams. And I know what's required to make that shift. I'd cap off the answer to this question by saying, when we look around the world today and we see what's going on, particularly in the world of business, whether it's low engagement, mental health, burnout, the thousands of people being laid off all of the time, palpable fear that people are feeling in work where we're supposed to be spending 80% of our time. I see why it's so broken, the world of work. And I also understand what's required to actually do something about it. So Humanness, without a doubt, was born out of that understanding and the understanding that we need to restore human qualities in order to fix the ecosystem of work.
Yeah. Gosh, what a story. There's so much to unpack. We almost need a podcast episode for each of these different chapters in your life, but what was the moment when burnout hit for you? Was there a burnout to breakthrough moment for you where you were just like, this is too much, I have to change something here?
Burnout is a very euphemistic way of referring to my ultimate crash and rock bottom. I'm going to just be brave. It was a spiritual bankruptcy. It was a spiritual bankruptcy. Spiritual doesn't need to be religious, by the way.
Yeah.
It's that I had a hole. There's a film that's literally just come out with Colin Farrell on Netflix about this gambler in Macau. It's really good if you haven't watched it. And it refers to the Taoists have this philosophy of the hungry ghost. So those of us who were greedy and selfish in life end up becoming these ghosts with huge mouths and tiny necks. So no matter how much they consume, they can never be satisfied. And the whole film plays on that. I spent my life as a hungry ghost. I was trying to fill a void. And this is what I mean by coping with my low self-worth or low self-esteem with high achieving and with drugs and booze. It really doesn't matter what we use to distract ourselves. But if we are trying to satiate ourselves with something outside of us, whether it be money, drugs, work, whatever, we will eventually collapse in the attempt because it will never be enough. So when I say I had a spiritual bankruptcy, it was the realization that I was completely out of answers. I had all of the things. I had a good job. I had a wife. I had my children. I had a nice home. I had a car. I lived in North London. I wasn't like destitute. Yeah. But the realization that I couldn't fix what was going on inside of me with something outside of me, I had to just sort of give up. I surrendered because it was like, I do not know what the answer is to this. And it was that moment where I was willing to say, help. That was the level of the burnout, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. Wow, what a thought of spiritual bankruptcy. I've never heard anyone describe it like that before, but it makes so much sense. This sense of almost emptiness and purposeless and lack of direction and where do I go, and everything I thought I wanted to achieve and everything I thought were the markers of success and progression and achievement and actualization, once I got there, didn't feel any of the things I was going to feel. So that makes total sense. Wow, what a moment, and such bravery to then say, I need help because I've gotten to this space where there is bankruptcy, spiritual, and I don't know where to go and I don't know what to do. How did you find Buddhism and Theism? How did you go on that journey?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the gift of desperation. My best attempt at life had landed me in rehab. I think that was the beauty of the spiritual bankruptcy, is that my best attempt had landed me there. And it was just so humbling, but it was such a relief, the surrender. Because what it is letting go. And you're hearing a lot about this at the moment, whether it's Mel Robbins and the Let Them stuff. And it's this concept of letting go is actually a very ancient one, of letting go of control, because I tried to control everything in order to be happy. And like you say, doing the things, getting the job goals, the job titles, the family. That was me controlling life. My best attempt had landed me there. So I get to let go and not control. But the Buddhism, the Taoism, I was not spiritual. I was more aligned to, well, when Wolf of Wall Street came out, a lot of people phoned me up and said, you should watch it. It's you. Now, I never, ever had that much money. But there was a lot of similarities in lifestyle. I was definitely not meditating, and I was definitely not spiritual in any way. But when I landed in rehab, and I was introduced to meditation and sound baths and various other spiritual practices. But then I went into 12-step recovery, where spirituality is a fundamental aspect. But then I went to uni because I'd never gone to uni. So I set up the Youth Conspiracy when I was 18. I had a place at Bournemouth to do advertising. I didn't go. I phoned them up with great grandiosity and was like, I'm not coming, I'm launching my own thing. And they were like, good luck with that. But it was amazing. But everything I had done up to the age of 34 was money orientated. Like, what can I do to make money? Because money equals pleasure or equals worthiness, and then I can feel better. So for the first time in my life after rehab, I decided to go to uni, but just for me. So I ended up studying history of East Asia and South Asia, and it was beautiful. I thought maybe I'd be a teacher. This was my idea. Like, I think a week out of rehab, I'll be a history teacher. It took me about 6 weeks to move on from that idea, but doing the degree was just lovely. And in there, I studied Indian Buddhist philosophy and Taoism, but I was also practicing a huge amount of it through my own journey of recovery. But that's where I got introduced to it. But today, there isn't a spiritual sphere that I don't love.
What an amazing thought. Go through rehab, come out the other side, and then the first thought is personal learning, but not to achieve, but for something that you wanted and for something that was going to give you pleasure and joy and a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Because often in careers, we do the jobs we think we're meant to do, or our parents think we should do, or society thinks we should do, or the path that is laid out for us. And what a beautiful thought to actually just follow joy.
It's interesting because I was talking to my dad about this. He was saying, well, when you were growing up, what should I have potentially done differently? What would you tell your children? And I said, well, if when my children decide they want to go to uni, it better be because they absolutely love that subject, like unequivocally love it. If they tell me they're doing this subject because they think it will lead them to a job where they'll make the most money, well, I'm not paying for it in any way, shape, or form. I personally would sway them off of it. Go and study for the joy of it. This is my subjective opinion, and because you're right, up until that point I had never done anything just for the love of it.
How did you find the connection between philosophy and business? Because those worlds don't usually collide, from boardrooms to the spiritual world. What was the moment to go, there's a space here, it's really, really important, I can play a role here and I can change things? Talk us through that journey.
Yes, you're right, there's a very specific journey there. Philosophy translates to being a way to live. And humanness is a philosophy for business, a way to do business. Interestingly, it came from my father had been applying really radical right brain processes in business for decades. But he had been using, when I say right brain processes, I mean art, theater, storytelling, sound, music. And he had been using these processes to reposition brands fundamentally for decades. I'm sure you've been involved in some of those projects with him in the past.
I have.
And been doing it, I mean, with everyone from like Kraft back in the day to Cirque du Soleil and everyone in between. He had actually joined me back in 2009 when I launched the Youth Conspiracy was first, and then we launched the Brand Conspiracy. But we came back to work together after rehab for a while, and we were doing these projects, and we were sat working with brands, repositioning. But I was on my journey. So I was watching the massive, profound impacts of these very powerful right brain processes on human beings who were experiencing them. So I was seeing people have emotional releases, seeing CMOs in tears. I was seeing teams of people come together in a way that just never would have happened otherwise. I was seeing, agencies and brand teams start collaborating in ways that just never before would have been possible. And two things happened for me personally. One was my purpose in life became more about human beings than it did about products, because I'd spent my life in advertising. But I was like, I care about human beings. And two, what was happening in the world was happening. So this was just before COVID and then after COVID, and people were getting very sad. We talked about the Gallup stats. 91% of people in the UK want to leave, want to quit their job. Low engagement, mental health, all of these things which are spiraling. Addiction rates during COVID spiraled out of control. Suicide rates. Those are the extreme things, but staff retention costs. Things were fundamentally getting worse and worse. So I had understood that transformation is possible because I had undergone it. We had these processes that we had been applying in business for years that actually, from my perspective, were far more powerful than just the tools, the way that we were using them. Because what we could now do, if used properly from a humanness standpoint, was we could start to create environments where human beings can be human. And that's the only task, not project-based work, but actually behavioral transformation, creating that environment for human qualities to emerge. The beauty being that I don't need to be an expert on HR to help an HR department have an environment where they can be more human with each other.
Yeah.
We care about creating the environment where the right answer can emerge.
I love that. And you talk about right brain thinking and how we bring that into organizations in a world obsessed with metrics and logic, projects and deliveries and timelines. I love the fact that your philosophy actually is more about being human and leaning on intuition and creativity and empathy. For some organizations, that must be quite radical. So what actually do you do in the context of humanness? How do you bring that into organizations to allow people to be more human? For anyone that doesn't know your business, can you explain to us what humanness is and how you take that into organizations, especially the ones that are much more left brain thinking?
Yeah, well, they're nearly all left brain thinking. Interesting. One of our clients, who is a big multinational, has called the first phase of our project the interruption. He has turned around and said, we need to interrupt. We're going to interrupt all of this pace, all of this now. We're just going to interrupt it. And it's only in the interruption that you can then start realizing that you needed to exhale. It's only in those moments. But what actually is Humanness? So we are a consultancy, an experiential consultancy. We focus on human energy. That's the thing which I don't think many other people specialize in, the human energy. We look at organizations as living, breathing organisms that have their own energy, their own frequency. And what we do in restoring human qualities to operations is we create energetic coherence between teams and between their organization. I could answer that question by saying, well, we increase productivity, we reduce staff attrition, we drive innovation and creative outputs, which is all true. We actually solve any problem. We're not use case specific. We have one client at the moment, multinational organization, going through a nightmare, and they have brought humanness in so that they can become the strongest team they can be, regardless of what is on the other side of what they're going through. Then we have another multinational client who has a huge smashing it. The team are best in class. And this leader says, I want us to move from being unconscious to conscious, because this is how we sustain our performance. So what is it that we actually have? Well, the bit that's not special, we have a 5-stage process. The first bit identifies the problem. The second bit focuses on the mythology of the company. Where is the myth and the magic of the company? Then we focus on individuals, their individual hero or heroine's journey. And then we look at where the overlap between the individual and the company exists. Because in that, like Laura, you have a value of integrity or caring, and you can really viscerally express that. And the business you work for also deeply, passionately cares about being caring, and you can start to resonate with that. That becomes purposeful. And then finally, and my business partner, Axel, who's heavily operational focused, the final phase is actually landing this very right brain, creative energy into actionable behavior change. Most of it zero cost, by the way. It's not about, it's about just shifting perspective. None of that's particularly exciting. There's a million consultancies with a million processes. Who cares? What we do, and this is the thing that only we do as far as I can see, we unapologetically move people to a place of, the PG version would be creativity and flow. We move people there unapologetically. What's scientifically happening is we move people from a place of high beta brainwaves, because when we're in high beta brainwaves, we're in fear, we're in fight or flight. We are not in a place of innovation. We are in a place of survival. This is where all the burnout's happening. We as a species are not supposed to function in high beta. It's supposed to be there for when a tiger jumps out at us and we need to react, not sending an email. This is why we're sick. We have processes that shift people to alpha and theta brainwave states. Now, normally, to move yourself from there to there, you may need to practice meditation, various types of breath work, mindfulness. I meditate every day, but not everyone does. And what we have are processes practices that just unapologetically shift people from a place of high beta into alpha and theta. When you have a team of people going through that journey I described in that place, that's where just magic happens over and over and over and over again. This is what we've seen.
Yeah. What's so lovely about how you describe your process, and you were very humble talking about the 5 steps and how every consultancy has that, etc. But what's lovely about what you talked about is this idea of myths and magic within an organization, and where that mirrors and matches individuals' ethos and values and beliefs, or it doesn't. That's really interesting, because for me, as you talk about energy, that's often where the energy of a business and energy of individuals really sits and really lives, and where you can have a thriving, motivated, inspired human organization, or you can have a very toxic, difficult, jarring situation. And that's a really interesting process that you've talked about, and energy being such a beautiful way of describing what can be really galvanizing or really toxic.
Absolutely. And everyone knows it. Everyone knows energy. Everyone's walked into a room and felt an energy. People have dealt with all sorts of situations at work, toxic or otherwise, and felt what that feels like, how they viscerally feel. And, the body is a very clever and complex thing. The chemicals it releases, like cortisol, like adrenaline, the feelings we're feeling are serious, because it's like ingesting things into the body that aren't actually good for us over a sustained period of time.
The soft way of talking about it was creativity and flow. What would you want to call it?
I would want to call it spirituality. That's what I want to call it.
And why wouldn't you call it that?
Because it scares people. I think it's scaring less people. Most of quantum mechanics is what was spiritual and is now being proven through the realm of quantum and quantum physics. More and more people are getting it's less taboo. The thing is about spirituality is that it's a very simple thing. It's the shift that goes from, I'm not the center of the universe, I am a part of the universe. That's it. That's spirituality. The shift that happens when one goes, this isn't all happening to me, but I am a part of everything. That energetic shift changes everything, because we move from a place of selfishness to a place closer towards unity, a place of being of service, a place of love and kindness. Why is that important to business? It's important to business because the Industrial Revolution, 175 years ago, Nietzsche famously said, we've killed God, God is dead, we're the ones who killed him. And we replaced the concept of a higher power with our own egos, whilst coupling that with the growth and the pursuit of profit as a purpose. Now, you take ego as the reason for existing, and you take profit as the reason to turn up to work, and you will end up 175 years later where we're at today, which is fear, over consumerism, mental health, burnouts, lack of purpose. All of those issues can really be traced back to that point. So what I again, unapologetically believe is that a restoration of soul is required in order to address the problems that we're facing today. And spirituality, the concept that I am a part of, not the center of, is the shift that I think needs to happen. I'm going to say something really controversial.
Please.
I don't believe in well-being at work. I don't think it's where it belongs at all. I don't think it is an organization's responsibility to care for the mental, spiritual, or emotional well-being of the people there. I don't believe an organization should be toxic. I don't believe an organization should not offer tools to people who want them, but it's not the organization's responsibility for an individual's well-being. I know from my own journey of transformation that nobody could have told me at any point in my active addiction or in any of that time in my life that I needed what. There's no, I wouldn't have listened. No. I was not receptive. I had to be the one who came and said, I need help. And similarly, at work, people are trying to firefight this global corporate pandemic of toxicity, of burnout, of all of the things by throwing well-being at it. But well-being is being treated like a salve to symptom, which will never end. But what needs to happen is we need to get into the root cause, which is, going back to this idea of spirituality, if people people are turning up to work to be of service to one another, turning up to work aligning to values, of being coming from a place of love, kindness, honesty, courageousness, etc., you deal with those other issues of toxicity, of lack of purpose, burnout.
Well, to challenge your challenge and to bring it back to you, though, is I kind of agree and I kind of don't, because completely we shouldn't be throwing well-being at people and we shouldn't be forcing it. And as you said, a sense of transformation and recovery, whatever that means to the individual, is only going to ever be done by the individual. But it can be enabled and helped by others. But as you said, you cannot push and force someone to see things, to awaken, to recover. They have to take that as an individual journey. And I totally agree with you on that. And I don't think it's about pushing well-being and having a poster in an office and doing these certain things. I don't think that's what it is. But if what you're talking about of a before and after is from a place of ego and selfishness to a place of interconnectedness with everyone around you, society, the organization of people, and that the fact that that interconnectedness means that all the actions I take impact everyone around me, then that does feel like well-being. And that is an organization of that interconnectivity of functions and people and skill sets. And there is an absolute organizational need to fix this, but I don't think it's through the well-being programs we're seeing today. I actually think it's through what you're talking about. So I agree and disagree, and I'm taking you back to your business, which is exactly what we should be solving, is the cause and the issue, not putting here's a gym plaster on it and there's some free apples in the canteen for you and you feel better now, don't you? It's like, well, not really.
The good news is we agree. We actually both agree. For all of these well-being initiatives to work, the millions and billions that are being spent globally, the environment needs to be created where people are receptive to it. The problem is that whilst everybody is in fear, nobody is being receptive to the types of change being proposed by well-being. And I know that people who work in well-being in all sorts of different categories are really frustrated because they don't know why leadership won't take it up. And because it's an outside-in entity, and because the human environment is one of fear and therefore closed. And it's only, to your point, only through terraforming the environment, so moving people from that place of high beta to alpha and theta, and then introducing, then you get people absorbing and willing and taking up. But also you need to sustain that. Like, I don't like using the term retreat for anything we do because the word is completely backwards. Retreating. No, this needs to be an advance. We need to be bringing this way of being into the day-to-day. My dream is we normalize all of this stuff so that calling in a sound bath is as normal as scheduling a Teams meeting. Like I picture maybe some hedge fund having some legal challenge and going, right, somebody get the finger paints out. We need like 20 minutes to just shit.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying. And a lot of what you're talking in terms of going through those different states, I've experienced through project work and brand work. And I can tell the listeners and watching us that it is absolutely transformational. And as you said, you know, you've had CMOs crying, you've had people going, oh my God, you've had people wanting to change jobs because they have these realization moments of, wow, I'm not aligned here and I need to fix this. So you can do such powerful transformational things in a team, but that's not going to fix a culture and that's not going to fix an organization. How does a business go about fixing system-wide, organizational-wide issues beyond individual teams? And you've talked about two incredible organizations at very different ends of the spectrum, one almost in crisis and one absolutely smashing it, that are bringing you in to either help get the best you can in a bad situation and really push forward and, as your lovely words, advance. They brought you in, but how is that going to infiltrate the bigger organization? Because you can be the most powerful team in a business, but if the rest of the environment does not constitute how you want to behave, then you can only hold that energy for so long, because you walk out of these sessions so galvanized and so connected and united and purposeful. But systems can beat you down sometimes, even with the best one in the world. So my question is, how do we systematically change it beyond a project team or the people that see the light and come and call you?
We have a saying in 12-step recovery, which is attraction rather than promotion. I'll come back to that in a second, but the brand work that we always used to do, the biggest frustration that I had was that it was so project related. It was you do this project, you deliver a great product and then it's done. All of the energy that was created on this amazing experiential process is lost after a couple of weeks. And that was always a huge frustration. The success rate of rehabs is very, very low. So people who go to rehab, there was a stat that I was told by a therapist in treatment that was the success rate of rehabs for drug addiction is about 1 in 60, right?
Wow.
Which is incredibly low. The thing is, if you ask 60 people leaving rehab if their life has changed, they will tell you it's changed forever. They will be completely convinced that it's completely changed. And they will mean it. The problem is that after 2, 4, 6 weeks, like you say, you can't sustain the energy. You can't sustain the experience because you just fall back into neural pathways, familiarity, comfort in the familiar, even if it's uncomfortable. So humanness was always about recovery. The success rate of recovery is way higher, because recovery is daily behavioral change, right? So this is, again, I understand what transformation looks like because I had to recover. I had to go through complete life. My life is completely different. Anyone who really knows me pre-2019 to now, I'm still me, but I barely recognize that person. So you have to sustain. And so the humanness journey is not an event. Like, we don't do events. We refuse, actually, in any way, shape, or form, unless it's a pilot, unless someone just needs to experience it a little bit so they know what we're talking about. Then it's about committing to a journey, which might be quarterly, it might be less than that, might be more than that, but it's about committing to a journey. But to answer your question around how do you transform an organization, when I launched Humanness, I had delusions of grandeur. I thought we'd be able to march in somewhere and start talking about cross-organizational transformation with very huge budgets. And what I was faced with was meetings with very senior people, some of whom cried in a new business meeting because they were resonating with how broken things are, but then not knowing what to do about it. Because do they go to the C-suite with it? Well, the C-suite don't really care. They're worrying about just the next
I was
going to
ask about C-suite because, to me, if a business has a systematic problem, it starts at the top. It doesn't go bottom up. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. How do we change things top down? And do they care? And if they don't care, how do we get them to care? How do we get them to feel it? Because do they not feel the problem? Do they not feel the toxicity? Because I just don't buy it.
This is my opinion on that, right? You and I both come from a world of brands. WPP, their share price is down from like 23 billion with the valuation in 2019. It's now 5 billion. That's WPP. Let's look at my dear Sir Martin Sorrell in S4 Capital. I know because I have shares in S4 Capital because I love Sir Martin and he's always been a hero of mine. Those share price is screwed. The industry that we know is in serious trouble. We know, we have friends in companies that we know what's going on in these places. Amazon firing 30,000 people recently. And I saw a really interesting take. It's not that AI robots are taking people's jobs. It's that Amazon Web Services needs to buy GPU chips to run the AI in order to be able to provide the storage for their clients. And by laying off people, they make revenue available to buy the chips. So how is this relevant to answering your question about leadership? Two things have to happen. One, a massive crash. I've been saying this for a couple of years. It's coming. It's just everything is unsustainable. What that crash looks like, I don't know. I'm not talking about a market crash. I don't understand economics. Definitely don't understand macroeconomics. I do understand human beings, and what we're dealing with right now is completely unsustainable. What people are dealing with at work, where their colleagues are just getting laid off in the thousands, and they're supposed to just keep sustaining in the wake of businesses throwing money into something like AI, which they don't even totally understand, and it's just like quicker, faster, more, and it's just unsustainable. So number one, there'll be a massive crash, and when the share price is impacted so severely that even the shareholders are willing to try something radical, then you'll get some radical change, and the C-suite might be given permission to do whatever they need to do to try and fix it, at which point they might welcome.
Do the C-suite really need permission, though? Do they?
They're beholden to...
Sure, but there's plenty of stuff that they do without shareholder permission. There's plenty of day-to-day projects, businesses, structures, realities, capex, changes, launches that happen without any shareholder involvement, and then they're informed. So I don't buy that. And I'm not challenging you, I'm challenging them, because there's plenty of things that happen without shareholder involvement. Of course they care about the shareholder impact, but do you need permission to ask for something that you think will have an impact? I doubt that.
So then we go to point number 2, which is leaders waking up, becoming conscious. Part of the issues that I believe we've got, and I'm not trying to alienate Gen X and boomers in any way, but it's that in the senior leadership roles in multinational corporations, it will tend to be Gen X and boomers who are the most resistant to the concept of a spiritual awakening or consciousness or any of these things. However, when I have come across those who are open to it, the conversation is very different. I haven't engaged many people in the C-suite who are conscious, but I have engaged quite a few senior leaders just below the C-suite who are conscious, and they get it. So like that example I was telling you about the best in class situation, this person just gets it. I didn't even need to pitch humanness too much. I said, this is what we represent. And he said, exactly. He was like, this is how I want to use you. I want my team from unconscious to conscious. That was a game changer, because suddenly you realize when people feel what we're trying to do. So to your point, you're absolutely right. Those leaders who are conscious will very likely run with this. So either a crash and it gets so bad that they have to do something radical, or they've woken up and they're willing to segue it in without fear of reprisal for bringing in lunatics like us.
Oh, there is method in the madness, though. Do you know what's interesting? Because we've touched on it, and I don't know if many people are really talking about it. I certainly am not seeing it on social media, because you know what social media is like. It's a platform for projection. It's not a platform always for discussion. And things aren't necessarily being talked about because, as you said, layoffs, redundancies, restructures, reorganizations, literally thousands of people, particularly in certain industries, particularly in certain countries, particularly in certain functions and certain roles. It's huge, the amount of shift that's happened in the last probably 12 to 18 months. And it feels like nobody's talking about it. Am I wrong? Like, are they talking about it? And where are they talking about it? Because I want to go and get involved, because I'm so shocked that this isn't being discussed more. It's almost like this silent epidemic of crisis that no one is discussing. And the forward implication of that on the individual, on the collective, on the organizations, I think is absolutely huge. But no one's discussing it.
What do you think that they would be saying?
Well, you'd hope they would say help, awareness, acceptance, asking for help. I don't know, but there has to be a conversation where this becomes conscious for everyone.
But this is what I love about this other client we're working with, where they're going through nightmares. He's like, I just want to create space for the team. I want to create space. We're going to come together. We're going to move out of fear as much as possible. We're going to come together and we're going to grow through this. Like, that's a leader. It's so cool. The reason I mention that is because I think people are afraid, Laura. There's so many degrees of fear. There's conscious fear, subconscious fear. There's the mild anxiety, and then there's, oh my God. And when we're in fear, we put on masks. On the whole, I have had to spend 7 years pulling off masks and training myself to be vulnerable and honest and to be in more faith than fear. The antidote to fear, of course, being faith, which is, I'm going to be vulnerable and I don't know where this is going to go, but I just will allow for it to happen. When everyone's wearing masks, some of them are aware of the mask. So some people might be like, I'm afraid, but I don't want to tell anyone. Some people are like, they don't know. They haven't acknowledged they're afraid. They're just keeping pedaling, because if I keep looking over there and moving that way, then nothing will catch me. But that's not sustainable either. So in order to address it, the environments need to be created. And perhaps it's a little bit about what you and I are doing today, where when we have very vulnerable public conversations, it gives people permission to have the same conversations. What's interesting about the personal branding thing and the LinkedIn stuff, it's like people are just standing up and being vulnerable. And there is such a beauty in giving permission to do that. And someone's being brave enough to just put themselves out there. Like, why is it that we react? Why people react to cringing at these moments of people being vulnerable? Is it a subjected fear maybe? But as more and more people start to do this, and it just becomes normal. And there was something really powerful in that, because it's in the vulnerability that we get to shed the fear. And if we shed the fear, then we get to build trust. And through trust, we get to build strength. And, for a business unit or a team to build that level of intimacy, every HR director, every CPO wants trust. They all go, we want trust. I spoke to one CPO who said, the thing I wish people trusted me, because if they're not honest with me, I can't serve them. And I'm like, well, what are you guys doing to be vulnerable, to build trust? Right? For people to feel safe.
And how do the organizations do that? How, there's a leader listening to this now that goes, oh my God, this resonates so much. I need to do something about this. How can leaders actually create that environment and that vulnerability to allow people to shed the stuff, to get on with the day job, and to allow themselves to be compassionate and empathetic and creative and in flow?
But they have to be open-minded and willing enough to take time, to take 3 hours, to take a day, to take 3 days, to interrupt the whirlwind that is the day-to-day, and to make time for humanness, to make time for these human qualities. And it's a reframing. It's a reframing to say, well, actually, I'm going to prioritize this, because at the moment, it's not a priority. Maybe you can help me here. How many things never used to be a priority in our lives that are now absolute priority, that we now make the time for, and that's what they need to do. We have the process. We have a journey of transformation. We can start it on like 90 minutes, or we can start it with 3 days. It can run for 3 months. It can run for 3 years. It all depends on people's willingness. It's just about being able to say, I'm going to prioritize. I'm just going to interrupt this to try something different. That's the scary thing for people.
Yeah. And almost it feels like there's 3 elements. There's a level of consciousness of actually even being aware of what's happening and what's going on. Because as you said, if you're not even conscious to it, nothing's going to happen. So there's an element of consciousness. There's an element of care. As you said before, there's a C-suite element of, I'm conscious of it, but if my stakeholders don't care, then I'm not going to care either. And then thirdly, actually taking action. And as you said, dedicating time and space and resource and budget is absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we also have developed an assessment, because you quite rightly said acknowledge in recovery, in step recovery, the first thing you do is acknowledge the problem. And we've built a diagnostic that it takes 2 minutes for people to complete, but literally maps out where the individual and the organization are out of coherence or incoherence. Now, in 2 minutes, we can show someone where the problems are within their team, within their relationship with the organization. So to be able to start there, which is how most of our work has been generated, is because we've said, look, fill this out. And now you can see where the energetic blocks are. Imagine if that wasn't blocked. Imagine how much more productive, imagine how much more efficient things could be.
Incredible. I feel like we are literally scratching the surface here. There's so much I want to get into, and we are very quickly running out of time, which I'm desperately sad about. We ask everyone, the final question is always the same. So we call our guests wave makers because they're making waves in the industry, in the world, and on business. So we always ask, what advice would you give to aspiring wave makers? I don't think I want to ask that. I want to ask, what advice would you give to leaders who need to be wave makers in this world?
Just be brave. Just give it a go. I would have answered the other question with be honest. Just always be honest, even when it's scary, because it's in the honesty that I get to build the realistic connections with people. But for leaders, it's just be brave. If you know there's a problem, because you must know, there isn't a leader I haven't spoken to that one-on-one goes, no, it's fucked. Like, there isn't one. Like, anyone who says it isn't. So if you know, then just be brave and try something radical. There really isn't anything to lose.
And it's a spirit almost of entrepreneurialness. So you might be in a huge organization, you might be one person, but if you can change something, wow, the impact that could have would be incredible. So this idea of being brave and taking action and be the entrepreneur in the organization, is that you see a problem, let's go after it and let's try and fix it. I love that.
And that's the attraction that's the attraction rather than promotion point. I've decided that if enough people are just emanating the energy of humanness, people will go, what are you doing? When a business unit starts improving its retention and its productivity and its output and its entrepreneurialism, people will go, sorry, what are you doing? And they'll go,
I want
well,
a bit of that.
at which point it becomes less of a sell, and it's just like, well, why are we all not doing that? So yes, we start small.
And becomes magnetic and contagious. What a lovely thought. Quinn Stainfield-Bruce, thank you so much for powerful conversation. I want this to go on for another hour. We didn't even get into half of the stuff I wanted to get into, but it has been such an inspiring and beautiful and honest conversation. So thank you for your story. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your insights. And thank you for humanness. Like, the thought of us all being more human is so beautiful and so needed and so powerful. And it's been such a refreshing reminder that success is not just metrics and growth, but it's actually soul and feeling and empathy and compassion and the interconnectedness of people, and that serious meaning and purpose can come from humanness. So thank you so deeply for the conversation. It's been really wonderful. If you're looking to bring humanness into your organization, please get in contact with Quinn. You'll find them on all the social platforms. And if you're looking to elevate the human storytelling of your brand, then please get in touch with us at the Ripple Impact. That is a wrap on this Ripple episode. Tune in weekly. Please subscribe for more bold voices, inspiring wavemaker guests. I'm Laura Barber. This is the Ripple Impact. We will see you all next week. Quinn, thank you so much. It's been so wonderful. Thank you.